The fledgling is the perfect helmet for Spectral Helix. It's a heist helmet that comes from a unique contract called Heart of Glory, which is basically at the end of the heist storyline, and it's actually a guaranteed drop from the boss. Basically, this unique contract can drop anytime from a smuggler's cache as soon as you're done the first two steps of the Dia questline, I believe. But this helmet is really good for two reasons. Firstly, it gives projectile speed. For Spectral Helix, projectile speed is more than just quality of life. It is absolutely necessary for the skill not to feel like complete garbage. The second thing is that it gives you far shot, and this is the big reason why I want to use the helmet. So Spectral Helix doesn't really work that well with point blank. It actually would much rather be using far shot. So the way that projectile distance works with Spectral Helix is very similar to the way that it works with Spectral Throw. It's based on how far the projectile has traveled along its trajectory rather than the distance of that projectile from your character. So in the case of Helix, it's traveling in a spiral, and because it's traveling in a spiral, it actually hits maximum distance for far shot, which is 70 units, fairly quickly. And you can visualize this by comparing a spiral against a straight line. So if you imagine that red line is the maximum distance, you can see that as these lines are synced up, it hits that distance fairly quickly when it's traveling in a spiral. Now, fledgling has a downside on the item, but this downside is actually really negligible. It says that projectiles cannot collide with enemies at close range. It basically means you can't hit an enemy that's directly on top of you. Even the wiki, as inaccurate as it is, says that the range of this modifier appears to be very small and requires enemies to be almost in contact with the player to work. You basically need to be on top of a monster to be missing it. Now the obvious question that comes now is, well, just play Deadeye. Why don't you just play Deadeye? Well, the thing is, offensively, a Deadeye really wants to take one of the other nodes, something like additional projectiles or chain. Neither of these are too beneficial. Additionally, Sniper's Mark, which would be the best way to scale marks in general, isn't good. Because when you have Sniper's Mark on an enemy, Spectral Helix will hit that enemy and then fork outwards. It'll just go into a random direction. You will lose that spiraling shotgun capacity for Spectral Helix, and thus you lose the ability for Spectral Helix to hit a boss multiple times. Additionally, Deadeye just isn't that good. So, what builds would be good with this? Well, the setup I have in here is a Raider using Void Forge. It's basically a Raider because I wanted to have really good defenses more than anything after watching Gauntlet for so long. Other things I would think might be good would include a champion that's going low life, especially into next league where you're stacking evasion and armor and using the perseverance belt. Varieties of Raider, especially those using Trinity and an elemental claw, would be quite strong, and just throwing this helmet on is plug and play. And lastly, what I think I'll be running this with in future leagues is with a Berserker. And I actually do plan to league start, maybe, as a Berserker using Spectral Helix. The thing is, yes, Spectral Helix is not the best skill to play. It's not a perfect endgame skill, but it has ridiculously high damage, it has reasonable clear early on, and frankly, when you're trying to push early league, you're willing to make some concessions. Now, the concession I'm willing to make is that I don't need my skill to play perfectly. I just need it to be good, I want to have great damage, and with this helmet, I think you can actually get a huge multiplier on your Spectral Helix with almost any setup.